Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today here in Lausanne, and thanks for the invitation. That's a pleasure to be here. My name is Julian. I'm in charge of operation of advanced sport instruments, and I will drive through our history, our challenge, and potentially exchange with you about what we've done, and hopefully give you some lesson learned for your future venture that you will start also in the sport business. The goal is to have something interactive, so I know that many of you are online, so feel free to ask questions, and I think Kilian will pass the question to me during that time. So I'm pretty sure most of you are doing sports on a regular basis. You always want to be better, to have an edge, to quantify what you do, and for that you need solutions, and that's our goal, that's our mission at Advanced Sport Instruments, to bring data to people, actionable data, to enhance their performance and their well-being. The agenda today, we'll dive into the history to see what we've done, what we had to change, and what we are going to do in the future. That's already a quite long story for what we call startup, and but I hope it's only the beginning. We will have a focus on our main product today, our flagship product, which is called FieldWiz. See the challenge and what we are doing to overcome those challenges and how we see the future. So once again, feel free to ask questions. If you need more clarification or anything, I will be happy to exchange with you, and also to learn from your question and what you have to add. First slide, very important. I think it's when we started at the beginning, we had our first business plan, the first idea, and it was straightforward to goal, to what we wanted to achieve. It was a nice bar graph in the future with the number growing fast. But what we realized, and what I want to show you, and that you need to be prepared if you want to go that way, it's that the reality is completely different, and if you prepared for it, it will be easier to overcome those obstacles. So, a bit of the history. So the company has been founded in 2012 by my associate, Lionel, born out of two passions. One is electronic engineering and the other is sports. For him, at that time, the sports, that was paragliding. I don't know if you're familiar with it, so people doing free flight. And he came up with the first version of a wearable. It was back in 2012. I know what you did in 2012, but it was the beginning of the smartphone. And he was one of the first to connect a wearable to a smartphone that helped pilots to fly longer. So it was that version here that you can see that were connected to a smartphone, and that gave many information to the pilots so that they could fly longer. He did an amazing job. He launched a second version, but in a really niche market. If you speak about paragliding, that's maybe 300,000 pilots in the world, and that's really, really the best case. On top of that, it was a market that was really crowded with many other solutions, so he was looking at other opportunity with his technology. With him, we know each other from sports, but from ski touring. I don't know if you're familiar with it as well. So we spent many times in the Alps, many long hours where we had time to speak, and that's when I came to him with the idea to use this technology and to open it to outdoor team sports, and mainly football, which is the sports I was practicing. I'm still trying to practice. And we looked in the market, say, okay, there is a gap, because there is solution for the biggest team, the richest team, but there is something missing, let's say, for the team below, and also for the player, the individual players. Because at that time already, people were measuring everything from jogging to sleeping, but there were nothing for me, nothing for my sports. So what we did, we said, let's try in that market. And it was back end of 2014, we launched a crowdfunding campaign on a platform called Indiegogo, which is kind of the Kickstarter. That was the best solution at the time. That was also the only solution that was working in Switzerland, because Kickstarter wasn't allowed in Switzerland at that time. So really exciting time. We built a communication campaign. We had a lot of media coverage, but we didn't succeed financially. We are looking at 50,000 Swiss francs, but we raised, I think, 1/3 of that, which meant we couldn't finance the project. But it was still a success, even though we didn't raise the money, because it was a way for us to communicate to the outside world. And at the beginning, we were targeting individual players. But we quickly realized that it didn't work with individual players, but we had many clubs, second-tier clubs, still professional, semi-professional, mainly in football, that came to us and say, well, if you adapt it to teams and not to individual, we will be really interested. And we are like a company, so we're not purchasing stuff on crowdfunding. We need to purchase devices that are already made. So that's when we did the first pivot. From the individual, we switched to the team system. We had to build also a docking station and a new web application for it. And we launched the first MVP, which was based on, if you remember, the paragliding device. And we switched to the football device, which is the same casing, that we but with a different application. And that we felt it was working well. It was difficult to launch it because it was an MVP, minimum viable product, that was ugly. The application was really basic, so it's as a Swiss person, you want it to be perfect, and it was really difficult to launch. But since there were no other alternative in the market, we launched it, and it started to work well with the first version that we commercialized in 2015, and we kept on innovating and launching the second version, smaller one, and I will come back later what it does back in 2018, and we continued growing until beginning of this year, where we launched a completely new concept, which was necessary, and that's what I will present you in the next slides. So the product filled with, by the way, we do other products, we touch other sports, but that remains our flagship product, really what we push, what we master here. So that's this device I show you that you place on a player's back. You can see on the slide. So actually, that's someone from the Iraqi national team. So a quite interesting customer, and that will record during a practice session or during a game the statistics of the player. What technology is inside? So we have really accurate sensor, one for geolocalization, so position based on GNSS, GPS, the motion sensor that will bring jumps, acceleration, shocks, ECG, also the heart rate that is connected to a shirt that will touch the body. And then we have to add many more technology to make it low power, to have the connectivity and so on. What does it give? So really already touched it. That's first vision of our web application. That's already a bit old-fashioned, but you can see on one side the tactical part, so the position of the player on the pitch. We can also see distance between player and so on, and also the physical part, the distance, acceleration, sprint, speed, max distance, and so on. Here another example. Before we saw an example for one player, this is also something which is important, is to compare the player for the first half time, second half time, exercise 1, exercise 2, and so on. So that's it in a nutshell, and if you need more information or if anybody plays football and needs a solution to improve, we'll be happy to connect. One important milestone as well, and something that we had that in a way made the difference, is that when we started, it was a gray zone, because sometimes we saw referee and they say, okay, is it allowed, is it not allowed? So we want to find the information to the association, to the UEFA, to the FIFA, but nobody knew because it was new. And more and more, the FIFA and the governing body of football starting to rule what they call electronic performance and tracking systems. And they place it in the rule of the game that if you want to wear it, it has to be certified by FIFA. And we were the first company in the world to have that certification. So we had to redo it in between, but that's the original one we had signed by the president of FIFA, which for us, as a, let's say, small startup, was really a great milestone, because the people looked at us differently and say, okay, that's the first one. They're serious. You can use it in many different levels, in Champions League, in the World Cup, and so on. So that's nice. But the main question, and I will be happy to connect with you afterwards or during if you have any question. So what? And that's the main question you have to ask, and to say, you have data, you have distance, you have acceleration speed, but what do you do with it? And that's exactly what we missed at the beginning when we targeted the individual players, because we gave them device, they test it, and the first time they say, wow, that's just like on TV. I see the heat map, I see the distance, I see my speed, that's excellent. The second time, they look at it and say, wow, I did so and so many kilometers, that's my map, cool. And the third time, they didn't use it. Why? Because they didn't, okay, that was nice, that was fancy, but that was it. They couldn't see the value of it, and they couldn't actionize those data. So that's really a quick question, and how do we solve it right now? We speak to teams where they have a staff that knows how to manage the data, what to do with it, and that's still something that will keep us busy in the future, is really, okay, if you deliver data, that's not sufficient. You need to give the key how to use those data. So that's one of the learning along the way that we had. Here, that's a bit the track record of that solution Fieldwiz. As I mentioned, we have many other solutions. It's really a mid-market segment solution, because when we started, there were already solutions existing for the top level, but we wanted really to democratize it, to make it more affordable financially, more affordable in terms of usage, easier to use, but without compromise on data quality. So we have customers which are really fragmented in terms of countries, more than 50 countries. Main countries, France and Switzerland, obviously, with our position in Lausanne, that makes sense. And then we have customers in more exotic countries like Bermuda, like Iraq, and so on. That doesn't make any difference, and that's also a good way to see different culture, different person, and so on. That gives also additional challenge, because when you have to give support, it's 7 days a week, and with the time difference, it's 24/7 as well. Many men, not so many women, but hopefully we will change that trend in the coming future. Mainly football, but we have other sports, rugby, field hockey, beach volley, and so on. So that's it. But we faced many challenges also on that market, and that's something quite important I wanted to show you, is the way, and that's what I presented at the beginning, it's the gap between, let's say, your business plan and the reality, and also what you have to expect. 2015, that's when we started. And in the positioning that we had when we did the market analysis, we were the only one in our segment. I mean, that was easy. We just had to go, and we had nice number adding up. Second picture below, it's 2018, so 3 years ago. You can see the market. So we were right. There were an opportunity, there were a gap in the market. What we didn't expect is the competition coming, and that's massive. And 2021, I didn't have the time to adapt it, but that's even bigger. And along those challenges, we have the competition. And in that competition, we have some advantage, we have some disadvantage, but we don't have any significant USP. So we don't have anything where we really can stand out of the crowd. So when you have something similar that's kind of like smartphone, you have to fight on the price, and that's not good. We still, as a startup, early stage, we don't have a lot of resources for marketing to push it, and we have a high cost of acquisition for customer. Being in Switzerland, it's also not so easy. And on top of that, we had a business model that wasn't really sustainable because it was a one-off purchase. You had to sell, 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 and no recurring revenue. So we needed to have a change, to find something in the jargon on how we call it, and you probably see it in your economic classes. We needed to pivot. I have that quote from a book from Eric Rice. If you don't know it, that's something that gives us some inspiration in doing those pivots, called The Lean Startup, a really great book. And really the idea was to change the strategy, but without changing a vision. So really to go in the same direction. That's easy to say, but then you have to put it in practice. And for that, I had a second book, that was really key as well. It's the Blue Ocean Strategy. It's really a methodology, a way to find a differentiator in the market, meaning that you want to do things better, but also differently, to give you that USP, to give you that competitive edge. And I won't go into the detail, but that's really interesting because you have to raise some of the attributes that you have. You have to create new ones, but you also have, because you cannot do everything, you also have to eliminate some parts and reduce also some other parts to find the best balance and create a new value curve. So that was really quite challenging, and that's also a risk because you have something that is working, but you know it's not sustainable, and you need to take a risk and take the time to change to something more meaningful to see the long term. But since we are in a hardware business in a way, that's much more complicated than if you're only on the software business, because hardware those are cycle of 1-2 years and so on. So that being said, I will jump to the next slide to show you what was the result of those studies and what we did and that we launched this year to really gain that competitive edge and hopefully become a market leader and grow in a really fast-growing market. So if you look on the top of the slide, that's the typical journey, how the competition is working and how the workflow is working. And that's really what we looked at first to say, okay, what can we do better and what can we do differently? So on the top, that's the typical journey. So you have players or athletes that are wearing a device that you can see here in the back or somewhere else. And more the staff, they want to look at real-time data. So for that, you have to place antenna around the pitch, and you have to connect the laptop to that antenna. If you connect it, you can look at the data in real time, but you have to be around the pitch, which makes sense. Once the session, the game, or the competition is finished, you need to synchronize the data. What we have or what we had in the past was with the docking station, what also the competition is doing, and you load those data in the cloud. Then you have the dashboard of the vendor of the solution, but more and more the clubs, the organization, also the media, they have a central system, also the federation, so the data are exchanged between the vendor's dashboard and the central system with an Excel file, a small interface or something like this. So that's really how it works. And we spent time analyzing that workflow and to see, okay, how can we improve it? How can we make it easier? And we came up with two main innovations. The first one seems basic, but nobody did it, and it was also a technical challenge, is that we placed a SIM card within each wearable that are worn on the player's back. So it works just like a smartphone. It's sending the data directly to the cloud. So you don't need to have an antenna, you don't need to synchronize it, makes things really easy. And thanks to the 4G today, and we're working toward 5G, this is really the solution of the future that we envision. That's the first part. The second part, it's about bit more tricky to get, but that makes a lot of sense, is that we don't do front end anymore. We connect our data directly to existing solutions that are athlete management system, that are video analysis for athletes, but also the media. So we can redirect part of the data that were used traditionally only for the coach, the athlete, the staff for the performance. It can be broadcasted on TV. It can be shown on a second screen for the public and so on, and it can open to many new use cases. And on top of that, the data can be accessed from anywhere. So the coach that had to be around the pitch before, he can look at the data in real time from his home or remotely, which in some cases that makes sense. And last but not least, I will say unfortunately, when you have a pandemic and when the athletes have to train alone, they can do it, just have to switch it on, switch it off, and the data are directly accessible to the coach remotely, and they don't need to do anything compared to the old world where they had to plug a cable to load the data, to write an email, and so on. So that's in a nutshell what we bring. And the idea was to show you why we came up with that and what are the challenges, and also that along the way you constantly need those pivots. I spoke about the book from Eric Rice, The Lean Startup, and he says something that is right, is that the success of a company is sometimes the number of pivots that they can afford. And when you plan, let's say your business plan, you still need to find a bit of reserve or way to pivot at some point, because from what I've seen, maybe what I heard, 99% of the business plan never succeed, but the company succeed because they knew how to adapt to that market. So that's it. I think we're quick here, but we have room for questions. I don't know if you have anything online that we can discuss, or from the people here. I will be happy to answer, or if you want me to come back to a previous topic.
Thank you very much. There's a question from Lucie Dordet online. She's asking, are you thinking to extend the sports available for your solution? I mean, here's some sport like swimming, racket sports, and others.
Yes, that's an excellent question. Thank you. Yes, that's also the way we designed the new architecture, because before we had a solution for, let's say, football, and we realized that the software was a bottleneck for us to explore new sports. Now what we do is we partner with all the software that are already specialized in a sport, in a vertical, or in a segment in a sport. And for that's way easier with our new framework to adapt to new opportunities. Could be swimming, could be anything else. What we're looking at right now a lot, it's endurance sports, trail running, ski touring, because it's our sports as well. But we're definitely looking at other sports, and the way we design the architecture is really to be able to, in a way, industrialize those opportunities. So if someone has an idea or has a software needing a wearable, needing data collection, I will be happy to connect.
Do you want to propose a complete solution in the future, including nutrition, training plans, and others?
No. In a way, if I come back to the way we designed the solution, it's realized that in the whole value chain, we had to focus on what we do best, or we think we do best, which is the data collection and the data enrichment. But what's interesting is that there are many of those platforms in the ecosystem that are really good at nutrition or something really specific, and we want to be an active part in that ecosystem, and to connect all data with those platforms to really have a complete solution.
I had a question. How do you deal with other companies or startups that have other technologies, like, as we said, second spectrum, that can it's another technology that doesn't use something on your body. How do you deal with that?
Yes, that's an excellent point. I think you always have to look at alternative solutions. In the example that you mentioned, and it's growing and growing, it's computer vision. So meaning you don't need to wear anything, and it gives you more and more qualitative data. There are still a gap, and you need a bigger infrastructure now, but in the future we know it will be easier. So that's something we need to have in mind to see, okay, where are we going? And there are many use cases where the camera cannot go, for instance, so we need to be prepared for that. More sensor in the body, for instance. As far as I know, they cannot get the heart rate, which we can. As far as I know, if someone is going jogging to prepare a game, he cannot jog along the way with the camera. So those are, I think it's complementary, but in the top level, when you have people in a stadium with big TV budget and so on, I think computer vision is really good. And there might be other solutions in the future. So yeah, it's in a way it's a never-ending story, but we need to keep in mind those alternatives to find to find the next solution for us.
All right, we have a question that's quite related. Are you thinking to equip training facilities with your devices to do a mapping or provide a better data?
Excuse me, can you repeat the end?
Are you thinking to equip training facilities with your devices to do a mapping and provide better data?
That's I think if the question refers to the precision, and that's a good point, because right now, if you need position data, it's working with satellite, with GPS, so it's working outdoor. Indoor, we can have some data, but we don't have the position, so you need to equip the facilities, and by equipping the facilities, you also gain precision. So that's an excellent point, and that's something we're looking at in the future. But we still need to think about the previous question, or the question you had before, is that maybe we'll have some camera system that will be much more powerful indoor than outdoor, and we just need to find the right balance. But I think that's a really good question. And
do you think about developing other products for other needs in the sports industry?
Yes, of course we need to continue to innovate. I don't have any concrete example. What we've learned when we started is that we had, like any entrepreneur or anyone, we had many ideas, you know. And then we realized that, yeah, if you want to do good product or be good in what you do, you have to focus at some point. So I think we'll keep on innovating, but it's really important to have the same focus and stay on the same path. So, and if we look in the past, I know if you're familiar with the crowdfunding campaign, and I don't know if it's still trendy right now, but when we did our crowdfunding campaign, we thought with a small budget we could develop so many things. So we made such a high promise, and hopefully in a way we were happy that we didn't succeed it, because we did it in 2014, in 2021, and we still haven't developed all the ideas that we had in 2014. So that's we need to be careful for that, because sometimes the temptation to develop crazy stuff and to find new way, that's high. You want to go there, but that's a distraction, and you need to stay focused as much as possible.
Okay, I think we're good.
When you speak about ski touring or trail running, what kind of information do you give in comparison to a Garmin watch or something like this?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. Thank you, because it's a question since the beginning we have. Okay, what do you do differently from a smartphone, smartwatch? And so for football and rugby, that's quite easy, because you don't play rugby with your smartphone, and it's not allowed by the rule of the game in football to play with a smartwatch. But then there are many other components, and I think I can mention two of them. The first one, it's the precision, because there is still some gap and question you can have about the precision of the data, accuracy. And the second one, it's really the live tracking. And here we're more into what we call fan engagement, which means in run, in races and so on, it's to bring an added value not only to the athletes, but to the public following it. And also it's a question of security. We have many events, many races where the organizer, the family and so on, they want to see where the people are because they could be anywhere. So that's, I know that there are alternatives with the smartphone, with the smartwatch, but here we want to have something really dedicated. And on top of that, we think that with the precision, we could also be a good alternative for timing. So that you could have a timing without the tags that you have right now, if that answers your question. But that was a really good one.
I have another one. Do you really focus on athletes, or are you gonna focus on people like everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Now we are focusing on it, on athletes, but we designed the new architecture in a way that I mentioned we could industrialize any opportunities. So you could think, okay, that could be the same for, I don't know, maybe animals, health, wellness. We could scale to many other verticals, or maybe the police, the firefighters, because they are athletes in a way. But we need to go step by step, and there are some verticals where you have also other constraints like the health. You need to have really strong certification and so on, and you need a bit different financing types. So, but the goal midterm is really to open to other verticals and maybe go outside of the sport. Okay, if not.
Thank you very much for coming, and I don't know if you have a few words to end.
No, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. That's a pleasure to be here. That's really a nice setting, so I didn't expect it. And as you can see, so I didn't place on the bottom right, you can find the website. On the website, there is a contact form, and if you have any project, any idea, feel free to connect. I have my name here, so feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I will be happy to follow the exchange later. And yeah, thanks again, and anytime if you need anything.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. No. Comme ça? Ouais. Ah, comme ouais, je vous écoute. Ok. Ok, merci à vous. Alors, c'était... Ouais.
J'allais faire ces trucs, j'ai un vieux, hein, mais...
Ouais.